Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unity Radiant Light. I'm Reverend Cherie Ruffo, and this is May 8th, 2022, Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. And today we're going to continue the Gnostic Gospels, known also as the Nag Hammadi Scriptures, with the Gospel of Philip. We began the Nag Hammadi series several weeks ago, and today we are now at the Gospel of Philip. We've learned new things, a new way to look at the scriptures. We've talked about that these scriptures were ones that were not included in the 4th century AD when they did put together the Bible, which chapters, which gospels would be in the Bible. And these were left out, and they are so full of information, kind of a blueprints for the teachings that Jesus left, and so much more. And each week after service, if you're here during service, we get together for some fellowship and we talk about, what we're learning. And one of the things that came up last week in fellowship is that we were talking about some of the terms that are used in the Gnostic scriptures, Gnostic gospels, even in the Bible, and how they may have a different meaning. So what may have been translated from ancient Aramaic into Greek might have had several meanings, and the meaning might have been intended differently. We're going to see that a lot today in the Gospel of Philip. And one of the things that I really love about this gospel is that it kind of answers a lot of questions. It's a lot of statements, but it starts with, defining what some terms are too. So we look at it and we say, okay, where does this happen? Well, most of us, like I just said, we grew up with the Lord's Prayer. This is the traditional version. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. I grew up in the Catholic Church, so this is the version that I grew up with. And you may have been in another faith, and you might have different words that were used. So how does it come from this original version? This is the one that's been translated only once from Jesus' ancient Aramaic. It's kind of like playing, the game phone. So as you say a concept, and by the time you get to the 9th person, a lot of times it's something completely different. In the new one, O thou, from where the breath of life comes, who fills all realms of sound, light, and vibration. May your light be experienced in my utmost holiest, your heavenly domain approaches. Let your will come true in the universe just as on earth. Give us wisdom for our daily need. Detach the karma that binds us like we let go of the guilt of others. And let us not be lost in superficial things, but let us be freed from that which keeps us from our true purpose. From you comes the all-working will, the lively strength to act, the song that beautifies all and renews itself from age to age. Sealed in trust, faith, and truth, I confirm with my entire being. They couldn't be more different. Yes, are some of the concepts similar, but this one goes a lot more in depth. So to look at this, I always try to be transparent about what I'm reading and where I'm getting information so you all can look it up if you like to and follow along. I use this book for so much because it's the hidden gospel, and it talks about the translation, a lot about the translations from the ancient Aramaic into the different languages. And I'm always turning to that to get more information. So if you're interested in that, and you're really interested in what the Bible has to say or other scriptures, it's a great resource. So I thought we'd have some fun with it this morning and pulled a verse. This is out of the Christian scriptures, the New Testament. It's Matthew, Gospel of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 24. And it says, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he'll be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. So we look at that, and I'm going to reference the hidden gospel for this. It says the Aramaic word here for master is the same as Lord in the passage on loving God and neighbor. But master also literally means the embodied ray of light that reminds us of full unity. So master and ray of light, they're very different interpretations. And if we look at the word serve, it can mean labor, work, cultivate, plow, but it also means to meditate. So as we start to realize that there's some really big differences here. The images unite around the notion of emptying oneself and creating a channel through effort from the outside in. The Aramaic word for hate comes from a root word which means to strain, filter, or clarify, but it also means the moon. The word for hold can also mean to honor or to make heavy with burdens and possessions. So honor or a burden. The Aramaic word for despise can also mean to neglect or consider worthless. And it's also related to a whip. And finally, we look at the word mammon. It actually is a transcription of the Aramaic word mamona, and its roots point to piling up of outer things or appearances that become a description of one's own life. Very different, probably, from what most of us thought it was for me, certainly. So if we take this scripture, then we add those definitions and we reread to read it again. It now reads, coming out of the ancient Aramaic, you cannot plow two rows at once, cultivate two minds in meditation, or follow two different rays back to unity. You will either turn away from one light, like the moon waning, and shine from the depths toward the other, radiant like the sun. Or you will take up the weight of one work, honoring the burdens that come, and neglect that of the other, considering it a worthless punishment. You cannot work for unity without being unified. You cannot cultivate the depths and simultaneously pile things up on the surface of life. Is it just me, or is that a really big difference between the two interpretations? So it's always good when we're doing this, when we're reading this, and people are asking the questions and saying, what does that mean? It's always good for us to look at it in every way. And we see this really when we get into the Gospel of Philip today. One of the things they talk a lot about, they use a lot in there, is the word salt, which also means wisdom. And the apostles said to the disciples, may our entire offering be provided with salt. So you might think, okay, great. You want the group that's there to have salt, but when you know it also means wisdom, it changes the whole meaning completely. So, wisdom was barren to them, and wisdom can be had in the intellect, but it can be had in the heart. We talk about that a lot. And we'll be talking about that as we go through this. So we've traveled on this journey. We've made this journey with the Essenes, who were thought to have written the Gnostic Gospels. And we've really looked at them pretty closely, understanding that they believed that we can all ascend into bodies of light. They didn't think it was just for the masters like Jesus, or this is something that they believe that Jesus came here and taught us this blueprint so we can all achieve it. So before the time of the Essenes, it was believed that there was a veil in place and no one could see God. Only a few very special people could attain it. And even when we look to Moses, he saw the burning bush. He didn't look at God directly. It was through a burning bush. So there was always this veil. So there was this separation between God and us. And the Essenes really believed in the Merkabah, which means light, spirit, and body. And it's an energy sphere within everything exists. It's the vehicle that carries us into these dimensions of unity and compassion and into higher consciousness. So what they wanted to help people do was to engage more with the Merkabah, to awaken to the truth. And for them, self-purification was a big part of this. They perfected themselves through diet and yoga, singing, chanting, praying, meditating, repeating incantations. They used to repeat the divine name over and over again, and all these things help them to attain that. And these are a lot of the same things that we use today. The ultimate goal was to become a full light body, to put on that coat of the rainbow coat that they called it. We saw it in Joseph in the Old Testament, the coat of many colors, showing that there was a higher consciousness there. We know that mystical experiences can also help us transform. The mystical experience is something that you can't really explain, but it could happen. I know I've had it happen to me in nature. You might come upon a place that is so beautiful that you feel like you've been transported someplace else into the higher consciousness, that things open, and it could be through song or whatever way it happens. These are all available, and these all help us to rise in our consciousness. And from these scenes and from these teachings that had to become secret teachings because the Essenes were hunted down in 68 AD and considered heretics by the churches at the time. So all of these teachings went into hiding. And we know that these Nag Hammadi in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, these gospels we're talking about were found in 1946. We know in Qumran caves above Jerusalem that they found the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1945. And it took a long time for these to be translated. But there were mystery schools that still had the teachings. There was the deep mystical teachings of different faiths. So the teachings were always here. And we know that the difference with these teachings is it was really from us to go from inside to outside, where a lot of the other teachings we've had was taught us to go from outside to the inside of us. And going inside helped us to remember and to awaken to who we are. And it's so important because the Essenes began their beliefs with saying that something happened. And it happened in the Garden of Eden, or it happens at some point where we forgot who we were and we believe that we're separated from God. So the whole point of this is for us to awaken to the fact that we are not separate and that we have this divinity inside of us. So the Gospel of Philip, which we're going into now, was the statements that were made in there to help us break ourselves away from this third dimensional reality that we've caught ourselves in, and to awaken to the fact that we're so much more. And Jesus, through his teachings, when he came along, he told us that. He told us we have the light within us. The kingdom of heaven is within. He told us all of these things. And as much as I really love the Bible and studying it, and I do it metaphysically, so I really, with the metaphysics, you can always relate it back to you, and it can help. But to me, it feels like by itself, without that, it's a beginning and the end, where the Gnostic Gospels are the meat of the teaching, the foundation, to where we can go to and really ask the questions and get the answers. How do we attain this? So the Gospel of Philip says that the transformation will not only allow the ascent of the soul, but will also makes us invisible to the archons, who some believe are actually extraterrestrial beings or rulers who wanted to keep us caught in materiality. And I'm going to be talking about the archons next week because that is a whole gospel in itself. And we'll be talking about it a little bit more today, but mostly next week. But there was belief that there were some people that wanted to keep us in this material realm through power, through everything else. And I think today it's still very much happening to keep us to knowing from how powerful we are. Each one of us has this light inside of us. And when Jesus came, he changed it. He changed it, and we can see even in the Bible itself, in the New Testament, you can see through the three Gospels of Mark, which is the oldest, Matthew, and Luke, which are believed to be written from the Gospel of Mark. They give the traditional, but they talk about Jesus' teachings. But when we get to the Gospel of John, it's a little bit different because it's about the cosmic Christ. And the cosmic Christ is about what we are. Christ is attaining, becoming the best that we can be. We really stepping into and expanding along any limited belief systems that we have. It's attaining perfection. And we know that Jesus came here and he did that. And the Gospel of John does talk to a lot of people, a lot of misunderstanding about that gospel. I actually used to stay with the first three gospels more because I was more comfortable. And the last, decade, I've really become more comfortable, and I love the Gospel of John. There's just so many things in there that I look to for answers. And in these Gnostic Gospels, the same thing. The Gospel of Philip is known to be one of the most interesting of the Gospels, of Gnostic Gospels, because it talks about mythological treaties that we have. It's not published under the authority of the apostles, they say. It's coming through the Gnostic scriptures. It's known for its repetition. It repeats concepts over and over again so that we'll remember them. But you can see how it helps us to go from thoughts and going on to the next concept. So kind of one builds upon the other. You can take this gospel. I like the Gospel of Thomas. I like to take this gospel one at a time and just sit and meditate on it, and really allowing what it's I think is striving to do is allowing us to read it, but go deep, really go into this power of understanding that comes from experience, and that's within us, and apply it to our lives. The teaching's going to apply back to each of our lives, and really think about how it does. Each person may have a different answer of how that works. We know, we asked the question, who is Philip? And that's been asked a lot about that. And they believe that is he Philip from the disciples, Jesus' disciples, or is he Philip the deacon, one of the 7 churches? And they kind of come to the conclusion that he may be a composite of both figures. And the information, the knowledge may be a composite. One of the major themes about Philip, the Gospel of Philip, is the reunification of the soul and spirit. So Philip goes right into, and he does talk about other concepts from Jesus' life, but he really, really stays on the fact that we need to unify ourselves, that we need to stop believing in separation, need to bring it together. And he does that through many of his sayings. One of the things, one of the sayings in there, he talks about, and you have to really look deep into this. If defiled marriage is hidden, how much more is undefiled marriage a true mystery? It is not fleshly, but pure. It belongs not to desire, but to will. It belongs not to darkness or night, but to day and light. The union of the bride and her bridegroom leads to the restoration of the androgyny. Through spiritual union, male and female become one, and there will no longer be male and female, but rather a unique being. If the worldly metaphor of marriage produces the idea of heavenly spiritual sexuality, well, this is completely modified in androgynous beings. So it goes right into it. When you think about it, the first time you look at that or hear that, you're saying they're talking about a wedding and brides and grooms, or is he talking about our belief in separation and bringing it back together? We have put ourselves during the separation into archetypes. We're male, we're female, we're mothers, fathers. We have any kind of label that you can put on yourself. We've done that. And when you delve down a little bit more deeply, you pull back the layers. Again, he's teaching us about dropping that idea of separation and becoming one. Talks about people being dead in it, and really talking about us who believe in separation to people who will live forever, will not die. So he's saying, wake up, we live again when we understand that we are not separate from God. He said when Adam and Eve were joined together in paradise, they were in condition of unity and knowledge. And once they separated into 2 different beings, they fell into ignorance and death. So something happened there. We fell into materiality and the separation began. So he really talks a lot about the sacraments in here. He talks about the sacraments of baptism, chrism, Eucharist, redemption, the bridal chamber. And he talks about it all in, when you go and you sit with it, all in us waking up to the truth that we are not separate. So you'll come across the reference of being, a lot of it coming into being instead of being born. So if we're eternal beings, we can never be born and we can never die. We understand who we are. We just are in being. And that references it a lot. When we awaken and ascend, we understand that. it really brought me back to over and over again, this unity power of understanding. It's this, when we're in the intellect, that's the surface level of understanding. We read it as it is written. But when we can drop into our heart center, our heart space, and just open up and explore, that's when we really start to see the beauty of what Philip is saying and what Jesus was teaching. It's what we learn in the language of metaphysics. That's why it's so important. I used to enjoy reading the Bible, and I looked at all the things that were happening politically to try to understand it. But for me, it really opened a new world when I started to understand the language of metaphysics. I could see so much more, because when you look at it, Jesus going up onto the mountain to spend time in prayer, that was, the mountain means going into higher consciousness. So when you can look at it with that language, it just makes it so much easier. So Philip is talking about us, who we're spending time with. If we're being taught religion or spirituality by someone who's dead, then you're learning the language of just the historical Jesus, probably the story. And you're not getting the full picture of it. And he says that we have to come to life and open our eyes. So that's the essence of what he is. I'm going to go into a couple more of his teachings, but one of the things I looked at for this was in YouTube, and I really enjoyed this. This was 30 minutes long. There's also part 2, which is excellent. But Understanding the Gospel of Philip, part 1, he really, the person who's teaching in it, really helped open my eyes into a lot of what the sayings meant. Light and darkness was in, if we look at the saying 53, light and darkness, life and death, and right and left are siblings of one another and inseparable. For this reason, the good are not good, the bad are not bad. Life is not life, and death is not death. Each will dissolve into its original nature, but what is superior to the world cannot be dissolved, for it is eternal. So he's teaching Philip, it's going back into that understanding that we are eternal beings. We are not separate from God, and we can call it anything what we want to call it. And if we've had this belief in separation, we cannot get to that full understanding of what this oneness is. And he talked a lot about the archons in this, and we're going to be talking about them, like I said, next week. But they're rulers that wanted to fool people, since they saw that people have a kinship with what's truly good, so they wanted to kind of distract us from that. He said the archons sought to take human souls. The Gnostics scriptures, though, have a fix for that. We can perfect ourselves and put on the garment of light, and the archons will no longer have that power over us. He said Christ has everything. Christ has everything within himself. That's us. We have the Christ within ourselves. We can perfect ourselves, whether we're human or angel. And the Father, there is no difference. We're all one. He also talked about, in the Gospel of Philip, and this is something that is one of the reasons why it was considered heretical information, because of what it said. He said, and the companion of the Savior is Mary Magdalene. Christ loved her more than all the disciples and used to kiss her often on her mouth. The rest of the disciples were offended by it and expressed disapproval. They said to him, why do you love her more than all of us? And basically, he said, if a blind person and one person can see are both in darkness, they are the same. When the light comes, one will see the light and the blind will stay in darkness. Because Mary was his companion, there was a lot of argument about whether they were married or not, or partners. And I always just felt it just doesn't matter. It's Jesus. Yes, it would have been normal for him to be married. It doesn't really have a bearing on the teachings of this. But the one thing that kept coming up with the disciples and with other people was, who did Jesus love the most? And that was always the point, where Jesus was love. They completely missed the point. Even if Mary was his wife and his companions, he loved all people. He loved all things, and he saw us all as one. He loved God, which meant he loved everybody. So a good way to experience this gospel of Philip is to just as I said with Gospel of Thomas, just to sit with some of the saints, kind of look through it, see what appeals to you. And I did this, and it was kind of an interesting story, and how it really evolved. But I did this with, I pulled up the gospel, and I sat for a while, and I sat with the concept of understanding, because that was such a concept that came throughout here, and it's a really big concept with unity. So I really sat with it, and I said, what does that mean? I kind of went into meditation, and I thought the big thing that comes up for me with this is always the surrender of my thoughts, my beliefs. I have to really surrender that. So I went into that, and it's kind of interesting because they say how everything pertains to you. Now, I didn't go straight into this gospel. I kind of went on a little journey, and I really thought about surrendering my unconscious beliefs, which brought me to a situation in my life that had happened that I really had to face surrender. And when I thought of this, I was drawn in my mind to a situation that happened when I lived in Hawaii. And I had been a lifeguard in college and on Cape Cod. And one of the things I picked up was windsurfing during that. So while I was in Hawaii, I had the opportunity to work on mastering, windsurfing sport. Of course, it was great. And I moved to Hawaii. I was married to a Navy pilot at the time, and we were stationed there. My grandparents lived there. My grandfather retired from the Navy there, so I had family. But on Hickam Air Force Base, they had windsurfing available. And I was really excited about it. I could get the board because I hadn't brought a board with me. So I went out to the Hickam, and I rented a windsurfing board, and I was on my own that day. I had the day off, and people there recommended that I take, windsurfing lessons or a refresher so I could really understand what was the winds were like, and the differences between Hawaii and where I'd learned to windsurf. And I said, no, you know what? I have plenty of experience. I don't need this. So what I learned during this time is I went out, and when you're on the leeward side of the island, which that's called, there's offshore winds. And I got caught in an offshore wind. And my windsurf, I was not able to bring it in. I was out there for quite a while. And there's a picture. And of course, no, that is not me, because I'm not that crazy to windsurf in that. This was definitely more my style. And it looked calm, but it wasn't. I could not, because the currents, the way they were going, I could not get back. And after about 30 minutes later, I really had my first real lesson with total surrender. I sat down on the board because I was floating out to sea. And I just hoped that someone would come along and be able to help me. And I had to completely surrender to that and just be calm. And that was a very new experience for me. And we didn't have cell phones back then. This was right before them, and couldn't call anybody up, and nobody knew exactly where I was. So I was there for about 30 minutes and really experiencing my first situation with surrender when Coast Guard was coming back in from being out on a call, saw me, and offered me a tow, which I, in my surrendered state, absolutely accepted and was towed back in. But it was really the lesson. I think the reason I went to it is because I was trying to think about surrender as part of this, this power of understanding. And a week later, I was still in surrender when one of the female pilots in the squadron, it was a friend of mine, asked me if I wanted to go windsurfing on the windward side of the island, which was over in Kaneohe area. You had to go across the mountains for it. And she was experienced. She was willing to teach me, help me work with the winds, but knew that because we were going to the windward side of the island, if I got caught with the winds or current, I would blow onto the beach, not nowhere else. So I gratefully said yes and surrendered to that and said, you know what, I need to learn. And as the day approached, she called to ask me if I would like to go to some place beforehand. She wanted me to have an experience unlike anything I'd ever had. And it was on that day that I walked into Unity of Hawaii. And it was on Diamond Head, and it was beautiful. Experienced my first Unity service, and it was unlike anything, and I knew that I had come home. What does this have to do with the Gospel of Philip? Well, that power of understanding for me was about surrendering my beliefs. And to do that, I had to really understand. I needed to go deep. When you pick something, you may pick a reading or a concept, It may take you to other parts of your life where you've had this experience before. So go with it. It's okay, because the bottom line is these gospels are about you. They're here to teach you about how to attain, this awakening, this ascension into greater understanding. So I recommend you to have fun with it, play with it. Just allow it to flow in your life. See where it takes you. The main theme that stood out for me with this gospel was this topic. Not only will they be unable to detain the perfect man, but they will not be able to see him. For if they see him, they will detain him. There is no other way for a person to acquire this quality except by putting on the perfect light. And the Essenes believed that as we ascended and we had on this rainbow body, that the archons, which we're going to talk about next week, but other people that were caught in the materiality, that were caught thinking that we were separate, at some point would no longer even see us, because the light would be so strong and we would become such light bodies. So this way that we can do this, activate this in our lives, understand, we have to start with understanding our true nature. What are we? Who are we? Why are we here? And if you're here this morning or you're watching this, that's obviously a big question in your life. So as you look to these gospels, just open your heart, surrender to the ideas, to the new ideas that may come that way. And allow yourself to look at you as you truly are, to awaken to that. And as you do this, that light that's shining inside of you and with you is contagious. It's going to be spread, and other people are going to awaken. And through that, the truth will keep rising. So I'm so glad to have you on this journey. I look forward to our continued talks on this, and I look forward to hearing about your experiences with it. And feel free to share with that, and let us know how you're doing. Love you guys. So why don't we, in honor of Mother's Day this morning, as we meditate, we're going to do a special meditation. So with your mics muted, you can get comfortable. You can close your eyes. You can sit back, whatever's most comfortable for you. And as we do this, we'll say our meditation affirmation. I am open and receptive to the spirit of truth, healing what needs to be healed and revealing to what needs to be revealed. And I just invite you to take a nice deep breath in all the way down to your stomach. And as you release, just release consciously any beliefs that no longer serve you. As we continue to breathe and release, we're releasing situations in our lives that don't serve us. We're releasing anything that holds us from the truth of who we are. As we breathe in, God is. We breathe out, I am. We recognize this field of love that we're in. We recognize that this is the truth of who we are. And as we go deeper in this morning, I just ask you to bring to mind's eye a cocoon, yourself wrapped in a cocoon. We're wrapped inside our mother's wombs before we came here into this world. Just feel that wrapping, that safety, that feeling of being nourished. Feeling of just being, not having put on any archetypes, just being pure spirit, who you are. It's radiant love and light that surrounded you. This is your truth. We come into this world to have our human experience, to become an expression of God. We forget who we truly are. So I invite you just to sit in the silence for a few moments, being loved, being loved, being the light. Whatever it is, just sit in that for a few moments. Truth is that Mother, Father, God are all the same. And you are that too. You are here, this expression of God, this spark of God, whatever you like to call it, of energy. You can't be anything else. You can believe you are. But as we open our energy to this light of truth, just feel this in your heart center. Feel it expanding throughout every cell in your body. It's always been here. It's just our awareness may not have been on it. As you feel it this morning, stretch your fingers and feel that energy. This is the expression of God that you are. You have come here to be. You can never be anything but the perfect expression of God. People can tell you differently, or you can think differently, but it's not the truth. It's an error line. Invite you just allow that love and that truth of who you are to shine as you feel this rainbow body. And together as we hold in prayer this world that we live on, Mother Gaia, that we love and we're part of. It's no accident we're here. It's up to us to take care of that. Be a good steward of Gaia. So we feel that love coming together, we are as one, rising up from around us, enfolding all people, animals, whatever situation the earth that needs healing. This energy is healing it. So powerful. We are the light, we are the love. Any area on earth that has disunity right now, we flood with love and peace. For any person that has ailments, things that they would like to be healed, we see every cell in their body temple as they are as whole and perfect and transformed. Prosperity is our inheritance, and we see it with each person and we celebrate it, recognizing that anything else is lots of scarcity and not true air thoughts. And as this, we are the peace, joy, that joy that's the secret sauce to everything. It is in that joy that we heal. Things are transformed because we are love. We are made in the image and likeness of our Creator, that is love. And for that, we are so grateful. So grateful for all the guides and masters, Jesus, our way shower, who came here so selflessly to teach us these things. For all those that have followed with the teachings, we celebrate. And for every mother on this planet, we celebrate you this morning. Love you and honor you. Whatever form you've showed up in, we honor. So we say thank you, and so it is.